For week 5, the Jets game against the Minnesota Vikings is pretty important. The path to victory may lie through doing what they do well on one side of the ball and completely changing things up on the other. Let's preview Jets Vikings today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, October 4th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the Jets are in London this weekend for a game against the Minnesota Vikings. It's a Sunday morning game, kickoff time scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Eastern on NFL Network. If you've ever been on the West Coast for a football Sunday, it's a very enjoyable experience because the games start right when you get up, and Jets fans will get a taste of that Sunday. We're here to preview that game, and I think it's an important game. And this year, the Jets have faced a lot of games in the early part of the season that I felt are important. And part of that is just due to where the Jets are as a franchise, where they have essentially assembled this new team on the fly that needs to play well immediately. This is a team, many teams build a contender over the course of many years. So there are steps you take along the way where you go from being bad to being okay to being a playoff team to finally being a Super Bowl contender. The Jets essentially are trying to build this thing on the fly. The old expression, building the plane as it's taking off. So I think that it's been important to see the Jets play well in the early part of the season, because until the Jets play like a Super Bowl team, everything we've talked about leading into the season is just kind of a theory. We need to see the Jets play at a really high level. Another team can get off to a slow. There are teams in the league who had big expectations this year who have gotten off to slow starts, but we've seen them perform at a really high level in the past. So even if they get off to a slow start, you can kind of like lean on your past experience and say, you know what, they'll figure it out. This Jets team needs to play at a high level. And through the first 4 weeks of the season, we have not seen this team play at a particularly high level, really with one exception, and that was that week 3 game against New England. And after that game, I was very, very optimistic about this team because it felt like things were finally starting to click, even though the Patriots are obviously not the greatest opponent in the world, even though there really aren't many big things expected from them this year. The Jets played at a super high level. And I felt like pieces are really starting to come together. We're going to see this Jets team take off. And then last week came the game against the Denver Broncos. And it's funny how like one game can change your perspective, even on things that have already happened in the past. Because after that Patriots game, I'm saying, okay, the Jets are clicking on all cylinders. We're on the move here. And now I look back at that game with the context of Denver, and I say, you know what? Maybe it was just they were playing a bad opponent that week. This week can change our perspective again. If the Jets beat an undefeated Minnesota Vikings team, we may look back at the Denver game and say, you know what? Okay, off game for the Jets. The things just weren't clicking. Bad job by the Jets, of course. I mean, I think there's no question they looked past Denver last week. I think last weekend did end up being the classic. I did not expect it to be. It did end up being the classic trap game where the Jets maybe read a few too many of their own headlines, got a little too full of themselves. We're looking ahead to the big game against Minnesota in London, a top-notch opponent overseas, and maybe look past the Denver Broncos. That doesn't say great things about the Jets' maturity, but if the Jets win this game, a lot will be forgiven. The Jets have received a lot of criticism this week from yours truly and from other sources. And I have to say, I don't think much of it is unwarranted. The Jets absolutely deserve to be criticized for the way they played last week. But the good thing about the NFL is that your next opportunity to prove yourself is only a week away. Just as last week, we were coming in off a big win. It took one game for the Jets to destroy all the good feelings about that big win. It just takes one game. It takes one win here for the Jets to, put that awful loss to Denver behind them. But this game is particularly important. And I think this next 2 weeks, this next 2 to 5 weeks, I think especially the next 2 weeks, this could be a season defining stretch for the Jets, because Jets are this week they have Minnesota. Next week they have Buffalo. Two games that are not easy. If the Jets lose these games and fall to 2-4, I mean, it will really start to feel like the bottom's falling out for this team. It's going to be a very difficult road back. The schedule is not super favorable. There's a New England game, there's another New England game thrown in there, but there are some tough games on the horizon. Pittsburgh, Houston. There's a New England game thrown in there, but it's not easy to see this thing snowballing, and especially again a team where the guys have not been through the battles before. You wonder how they would respond to things kind of going off the rails. Whereas if the Jets win the next two, then we're right on track. Then we're kind of right where we thought this team would be. We can say the Jets are among the elite of the elite in the NFL. Jets split the next two. They're still alive, but questions will continue to linger about this team. And, I think through the first 4 weeks of the season, what I would say is this looks like a team that's probably, going to compete for a playoff spot, probably going to be around the 500 range all season, but one that does not really look like it's playing at a Super Bowl level. Not a team that necessarily looks like it has Super Bowl potential. And if the Jets split the next two, I think that assessment will start to stick. I think we'll start to figure out, this team's not a bad team, but it's nowhere near as good as we thought it would be. Jets need guys to step up in this game. And this is a big opportunity for this football team because you're facing a Minnesota team that's undefeated, but Minnesota team that did show some cracks a week ago in Green Bay. I mean, they beat the Packers, but it was a shaky victory. They jumped out to a big lead, and Packers mounted a big comeback in that one. This is not an invincible Minnesota team. Of course, they're quarterbacked by our old friend Sam Darnold, who's off to a very good start this season, but I think we all know Sam has some tendencies that lead to mistakes. And even yesterday when we talked with Luke from Locked On Vikings, he indicated that, Sam's different. He's playing at a higher level, but he's not that different from the quarterback we know. So, and of course, we know Aaron Rodgers is looking to bounce back after a rough game. I think to be fair, it was a rough game. It was not a dismal performance by any stretch of the imagination, but it was not a good performance by any stretch of the imagination either. And I think it's true for the entire Jets team. This Jets team really needs a signature win. If the Jets are going to make good on all the hype, if they're going to make good on all the attention they got in the preseason, this is the moment where it's time to step up. We're 4 weeks into the season. Everybody should be acclimated now. The Mike Williams pitch count is ending. Guys should be getting more familiar with playing with Aaron Rodgers. This is the time to make a move. And if they don't, then we're going to have to reassess where they are this season. All the talk about Davante Adams this week. If the Jets don't win this game, I don't see what the case is for trading for Davante Adams, because it's not like Davante Adams is going to take a team that's not a Super Bowl caliber team and suddenly put them over the top. Davante Adams only makes sense if you think you're close. If you think you're right there with the rest of the teams, and Davante Adams is the guy that if you think you're right there with Kansas City, if you think you're right there with Buffalo, then Davante Adams makes sense because Davante Adams could put you over the top. If you're well behind all these teams, he alone is not going to bridge the gap. So I think we should put this Davante Adams talk to rest until the Jets go out there and win this game over Minnesota. You win the next two, you're right in the mix. Then Davante Adams makes sense. You don't win this game, you don't beat Buffalo. I struggle to see the logic behind making a big move. The Jets keep talking like they're there. Jets keep talking like they're a Super Bowl team. Well, it's time to show it. The time for talk is over. We've been hearing for a year and a half, really, since the Jets traded for Rodgers, that they have Super Bowl dreams. And it's great to talk in the offseason. And you can even talk when Rodgers misses the whole season. You say, what if Rodgers was here? We'd be right there. Well, the first 4 weeks of the season, the Jets have not looked like a Super Bowl team. Now you're not on the road. You're at a neutral site in London against an undefeated opponent. It's time to step up a weight class. It's time to deliver. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about how the Jets can do that. Jets have a very specific style on defense under Robert Saleh, but I think that might need to change this week. I think it might need to change going forward based on the personnel the Jets have. But I think especially against this opponent, there are some tweaks the Jets may need to make to their system. We'll talk about what they are as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Do you think the Jets will hold Justin Jefferson to under 83.5 yards this week? Do you think Christian McCaffrey's going to have a big week and run for more than 75.5 yards? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Again, it's PrizePicks. It's the best way to play daily fantasy sports. You go to PrizePicks, download the PrizePicks app, today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, it's PrizePicks. Run your game. So much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you every dayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. New episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Jets in London this week for a game against the Minnesota Vikings, 9:30 a.m. Eastern. The game will be shown on NFL Network. Vikings are undefeated. You know, when the schedule came out, and this shows you again why I always say this at the time, schedule release day can be the most overhyped day in the league. This is a great example because when the schedule first came out, most of us were saying, okay, Jets will be facing a rookie quarterback in this game, J.J. McCarthy, or they'll be facing Sam Darnold. That's a win. Well, look what's happened now. Jets have not looked as good as they were hyped up to be in the early part of the season. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings are 4-0 behind Sam Darnold, who is in the starting lineup because McCarthy's injured and out for the year. Well, now this game looks tough, and the Vikings are favored, and rightly so, because the Vikings have been playing at a higher level than the Jets all season long. Darnold is interesting because if you look at the numbers, he has one of the longest times to throw in the league, and he's still making a fair share of mistakes. Now, I think he is playing at a higher level than he was with the Jets, and we could have a week full of podcasts about what the Jets did with Sam Darnold, because they threw him into an impossible situation. They gave him Adam Gase coaching. They gave him no offensive line. They gave him no playmakers. Essentially, his job was to bail out the franchise from all of the bad circumstances at a point where he was trying to figure out how to play. You put this young guy, after he's got more experience, after he's more seasoned, after he's seen a few things in the league, after he's learned how to read coverages better, you put him into a good situation where you've got a good system, where you've got Justin Jefferson, you have other good playmakers. Good results happen. At the same time, Sam, if you've watched him, you see that the tendency to make mistakes is still there. Now, I don't know how this is going to turn out for Sam Darnold in the long run. Has Sam Darnold finally figured it out? Is Sam Darnold going to be a good quarterback going forward? Part of you as a Jets fan hopes for him because they threw him into such a bad situation, and he always handled it with class. Part of you may hope it doesn't happen because it'd be another, tough thing to live with as a Jets fan if you let another good quarterback go out the door, goes on to have success elsewhere because you mismanaged him. For this game, though, I think the hope for the Jets has to be that you get him to revert. At least you see the Sam Darnold you saw during his time in New York. And how do you do that? I think pressure is one of the keys because, again, Darnold has one of the longest times to throw in the league. Rodgers is getting the ball out quickly. Rodgers is all about distributing the ball right now as soon as he gets it. Darnold is like a guy who lets things marinate a little bit more. And that can lead to bad things, as we saw during his time with the Jets. Sam was not like the quickest processor with the Jets, and that led to issues when the Jets didn't have a good offensive line. Sam now, he's got a little bit more time to cook. So the Jets need to eliminate that. The Jets need to generate a pass rush. Unfortunately, if you're watching the Jets right now, there's not really much of a pass rush to speak to. Will McDonald is having a pretty good second season. He's getting to the quarterback a lot. I don't know that anybody else is really doing a very good job of that. Even Quinnen Williams is struggling. So Quinnen Williams needs to step up. But look, this is a Jets team that just doesn't have the defensive line talent it had a year ago. Bryce Huff is gone. John Franklin Myers is gone. Jermaine Johnson's not with the team right now because he's injured. Hassan Reddick if Hassan Reddick's here, it's a different story. Hassan Reddick never reported, though, which means that, you just don't have the pass rushing talent that you did a year ago because all of those guys that I mentioned, and Quinnen Williams has to step up, and even, Quentin Jefferson. I mean, I don't know how good Quentin Jefferson was. I think a lot of his success may have been playing next to Quinnen Williams, but I'm not sure the Jets have gotten the same level of production from the guys who have replaced him. So the Jets just don't really have a pass rush. They don't have a consistent pass rush with four men right now. I think they have to dial up blitzes. I think they need to get more aggressive. I think the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball needs to adjust. And I think they need to attack Sam because, as we know, when Sam's feeling pressure, when his internal clock gets sped up, and I still think this is, even though he's playing at a higher level in Minnesota, I still think it's true. I still think you can see mistakes when he's not feeling comfortable. And that's one of the things the Jets need. This Jets team, with the offense still trying to figure things out. We'll get to the offense in a bit, but with this offense still trying to figure things out, you've got to force some turnovers. You got to make some big plays on the defensive side of the ball. And I think the other thing is, look, the Jets are going to have to try and this is really crazy to say because the Vikings have the guy who may be the best receiver in the NFL in Justin Jefferson. But I also think the Jets need to sell out against the run because this run defense has just been not good. I mean, 2 of the 4 games, the other team's running backs have averaged 5 yards per carry against them. It's not a sturdy defensive line. And Quinnen stepping up. Quinnen's not having a good year. Quinnen stepping up would help a lot. I mean, it would actually mask a lot of the issues on the defensive line, but too many guys are getting pushed around. I mean, the defensive end position, McDonald's, one of the challenges for the Jets right now is that Will McDonald has to play a lot because he's the only defensive end who can get to the quarterback. But Will McDonald is overmatched in the run game. So you're trading, which you have to do because in the NFL, shutting down the pass is more important than shutting down the run. But you have to play McDonald, but it really comes back to hurt you against the run, especially when you don't have any other good run defensive linemen. I think you look across the Jets defensive end position. Michael Clemens is not playing well. You can just go down the list. They don't have defensive linemen who are playing well against the run, which means they have to sell out against it. They need to bring that extra safety down. Now you may be saying, well, you just said shutting down the pass is more important. It is. You can't get run over the way the Jets have been run over in the early part of the season. And the way you shut down the pass is you lean on the guys who are your stars. This is the game where Sauce Gardner needs to travel with Justin Jefferson. The Jets spent a lot of the offseason telling us that we're going to have Sauce Gardner shadow the other team's best receiver more often. This is the game where it needs to happen. I mean, if you're not going to do it for this game, I don't know when you're going to do it. I think DJ Reed's a great player. I think DJ Reed's an outstanding second corner. I think DJ Reed would be the number 1 corner on a lot of teams in this league. And that works fine most weeks. That's not going to work against Justin Jefferson. The reason you drafted Sauce Gardner in the top 5 was for a game like this, to shut down Justin Jefferson. It's a gamble. Look, it's a huge gamble. And Jefferson's probably going to have his moments. He's a great player. Sauce will have his moments. But the Jets defense as constructed right now, they can't get to the quarterback. They can't stop the run. The one thing they can do is cover. That means you lean on your coverage guys. That means you ask more out of Sauce. He's a premium player. His job is to go out there and shut down the elite receivers of the league. And most weeks you're fine, no matter which of your 2 corners covers the other team's number 1 guy, because you still have DJ Reed. But this is not a game for DJ Reed to play Justin Jefferson. This is a game where Sauce Gardner shows you why he's the first team All-Pro. And you drop that safety in the box, you're leaving one-on-ones on the outside. The Jets are one of the few teams in the NFL that might be comfortable with a one-on-one on the outside with Justin Jefferson because you have Sauce Gardner. We'll see how it goes. It's a gamble. And Jefferson may win the matchup. He may draw Sauce. He may bring Sauce to a draw. Sauce may win the matchup. But I think if you look at the way this is constructed, that's the most likely path to success. Whether or not it works, I don't know. But heavier blitzes, try and force mistakes, try and get to the quarterback when he can't rushing 4, and bring extra guys down and hope Sauce holds up one-on-one against Jefferson. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to what the Jets need to do on the offensive side of the ball. Jets did not handle a pressure defense well last week in Denver. They did not handle the multiple looks the Broncos threw at them well. It's going to have to improve this week. Let's talk about some ways they can do it as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. In today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So Jets are 2.5-point underdogs in London against the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday. So you place $5 down on the Jets. Let's say you think the Jets are going to win. $200 in bonus bets. So after you win the Jets with the Jets on Sunday, you go to the other NFL games and put some money down. A great way to spend your Sunday on FanDuel. The Jets, let's hope they figure it out. But no matter what happens, the Jets are not guaranteed to win. You're guaranteed $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. Jets and Vikings, London. Jets' 3rd game in franchise history in London. In 2015, they beat the Miami Dolphins, and in 2021, they lost to the Atlanta Falcons. It's interesting, side note that Woody Johnson was actually the Jets owner, was actually the ambassador to the United Kingdom for 4 years, and they did not play in the UK in that time. They did play once before Woody was the ambassador, and once since. This will be the 2nd time since Woody stopped being the ambassador that the Jets play in London. A very important game, I think, for the New York Jets. As far as Week 5 games go, there's sometimes Week 5 games don't really matter that much. I think this is a very important game. I think the Jets really need to avoid going 2-3 before this Buffalo game next week. I think the Jets need to build some momentum. I think the Jets need to show that they're a legitimate team. And also with the Devontae Adams talk swirling this week, I mean, I don't see what the point is unless you think you can go toe-to-toe with the contenders right now of trading for Devontae Adams. So this is a game where the Jets have a chance to show they could go toe-to-toe with what's been the best team in the NFL through the first 4 weeks. I don't know if Minnesota's ultimately going to be the top team in the NFC, but I think we could say through the first 4 weeks, the Minnesota Vikings have been the best team in the NFL. This is a great measuring stick for the Jets or for any other team facing Minnesota. And they're going to be a challenge because this defense is very good. This is an excellent defense. And in some ways, you'll see a lot of the same stuff you saw last week from Denver. Vance Joseph and Brian Flores, Joseph being the Broncos defensive coordinator, Flores, probably a familiar name because he was the Dolphins head coach for a couple of years. And then before that, he was with the Patriots. Flores is Minnesota's defensive coordinator. So you'll see a lot of disguises. Flores comes straight off that Bill Belichick tree where he's trying to fool you. Last week, the Broncos threw a lot of different looks at the Jets up front, and the Jets did not do a very good job. There were many ways the Jets did not do a good job. I don't think they did a good job identifying who the pass rushers were. When the Broncos frequently were just loading the line of scrimmage with guys, and some of them would rush, some of them would drop back, and essentially your blocking scheme comes down to you got to figure out who the rushers are and assign a guy to them. And there were instances where the Jets did not do that very well, most notably a fourth down play in the fourth quarter where the Broncos got a free runner on Aaron Rodgers and ended up with a sack. Jets need to do a better job blocking up front. I mean, it was not a good performance by the offensive line. Tyron Smith did not have a good game. I thought Tyron Smith was actually the second best lineman. I don't think he had a good game. Elijah Vera Tucker was really, the only Jets offensive lineman I thought who played okay in that game against Denver. I thought very rough game for John Simpson, Joe Tippmann, and Olu Fashanu. I thought, and the rookie is the rookie. He was not supposed to be in the starting line. He's going to be starting this week because Morgan Moses is out. Although Morgan Moses did return to practice this week, but Olu Fashanu, very rough start to his career. Really looked overmatched. Jets are going to have to do better. I think one of the things you'll have to see guys stay in more frequently. You'll keep the tight ends more frequently. Jets even tried that last week. It didn't work all that well. A lot of this goes to Aaron Rodgers and Joe Tippmann. They need to do a better job identifying at the line of scrimmage where the blitzes are coming from. And I think another thing is the Jets need to figure out, I think there were some times Rodgers missed his hot routes in that game. But I think another aspect of this is we need to see more Braylon Allen. And maybe it's a simplistic solution, but against a defense like Minnesota, I think Allen's style is going to work better. I think, Braylon Allen's more of a straight ahead runner. I think for the way the Jets offensive line is playing, it's not a great fit for Breece. Now, you could say the same thing last year. A lot of people are pointing out, last year Breece Hall was not a guy who was consistent on a play-to-play basis. So what's different this year? The Jets offensive line was run blocking very much the same way it was last year, the way it is this year. So what's the difference? Well, the difference was last year the alternative was Dalvin Cook. So even though Breece was not efficient on a play-to-play basis, he had a shot. He at least had a shot of hitting a home run in a way he did not with Dalvin Cook. This year it's different because this year the alternative is Braylon Allen. A guy who's you can count on is not going to lose yardage. You give the ball to Braylon Allen, he's going to grind out a couple of yards, and especially again, physical defense, hard hitting defense. I think this is a Braylon Allen game. I think the Jets need to get Braylon Allen more involved in the passing game. I think the screen game can be very effective for the Jets in this one, especially against if you're not really comfortable, if you're going up against a team that you think may blitz, especially if you're not sure where the pass rushers are going to coming from. The screen can simplify things. Because against blitzes, the blitzers essentially run themselves out of the play because when you throw the screen, they're running up the field to try and get the quarterback. The quarterback's just getting the ball out quickly. He's just going to dump it over the top of them, and they're out of the play. You get your linemen downfield, and then there are less guys for them to block. Braylon Allen's been a very effective receiver for the Jets this year. I think they've gotten away from him the last couple of weeks. I think he should be utilized in the passing game, and I think Breece should be relegated to the number 2 back role for now. I'm not saying forever, but I think for right now, Breece as the number 2 back would be good. But I think utilizing Breece in the passing game certainly could be helpful. I think, the Jets scored that touchdown on the play where Breece and Braylon were both on the field at the same time. And I don't think you can run that like 60% of the time. If people were talking about it being a regular feature, it depends on what you mean by regular feature. Can you throw the look at them a couple times in a game? Sure. Is it going to work if you put them on the field like 60% of the time? No. So put that look on the field a couple of times a game. And outside of that, you hope Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers' chemistry improves with another week. You hope Mike Williams' health improves with another week of healing. And I think we're to the point where the Mike Williams pitch count should be obsolete. Even last week, Allen Lazard got more plays than Williams. I think that's got to change. And I know Lazard's actually off to a decent start this year, but you want Mike Williams more of a featured player in this offense than Allen Lazard over the long run. That's going to do more things for your offense. Jets offense, at the passing game, it's about quick separation. It's about getting the ball out quickly. I think one of the things the Jets need to do, figure out better ways to get Garrett Wilson involved, and that falls on Nathaniel Hackett. I pretty much went down the list. I mean, pretty much everything needs to be better for the Jets. The blocking needs to be better. The quarterback play needs to be better. The receivers need to be better. The play calling needs to be better. The personnel groups that they use need to be better. Yeah, that pretty much sums up last week against the Broncos, doesn't it? But especially against the Minnesota defense, I think things need to be run at precision. I think Braylon Allen having a key role is important. I think, figuring out, doing a better job with your protections, more max protections for Rodgers is important. And I think, guys winning their one-on-ones, it just wasn't happening last week. Jets have guys who can execute on this offense. They haven't executed so far. That needs to change. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll be back to talk more Jets. We'll talk about what happened between the Jets and Vikings next time here on Locked On Jets.